So for some of you that watch my videos regularly, you'll know that I talk about emotional integration, shadow work as being integral parts of fully benefiting from your spiritual journey, to be able to fully accept that abundance that you get at the end of your spiritual journey, and to be able to fully experience that abundance. But one thing that is very, very important is when we're going through our shadows is learning how to integrate them. And something that I have been confused about is, how do we integrate the shadows if they are already a part of us? Hello and welcome to Productively Mindful. My name is Alanda Schultzes. I hope you enjoy your stay here. I hope you find value in this video. So from the intro, you can probably tell what I'm going to talk about. And it is the integration part of our shadows. I was actually thinking about what kind of questions we could ask ourselves to be able to understand what that integration means and how we can integrate those shadows into our practice, into the shadow work practice, into our spirituality practice. And there are 4 questions that I thought about that you can follow in that specific sequence that I feel like gives you a good idea if you have integrated your shadow, if you have understood your shadow to fully be able to integrate it. So I'm going to go through those questions and I'm going to talk about them in that specific order that you should ask yourself. So the first question is, have I fully brought my shadow up from the subconscious to be able to recognize it? The reason why this is important is because oftentimes we start the shadow work by realizing our shadow from the superficial point of view. What I mean is, if we look at perfectionism, it's essentially something that prevents us from taking action or really slows us down in taking action because we feel like the action that we take is not perfect enough. But that is a very superficial way of seeing the shadow. The shadow itself is not perfectionism. The shadow itself is where that perfectionism comes from. And that can be many things. We want to put our subconscious under the spotlight and question the hell out of it until we come to a point where we're like, that makes a lot of sense. That resonates with me a lot because I feel deep within that is the reason why that shadow exists. That shadow is not perfectionism. That shadow is this thing that I just found out from my subconscious. So for example, with perfectionism, it could be something like, anytime I would have done some sort of a task that my parents asked me to do, I never got recognition, or the recognition that I got was not substantial enough. So I always overcompensate with every single task I do to be able to make it as perfect as possible, because otherwise it's not good enough, right? So it could be something like that. That is the shadow, the lack of the recognition, the lack of appreciation for the work that you do. That is where that shadow comes from. It's not the perfectionism. So we want to dig deep into our subconscious to be able to recognize the shadow for what it truly is. Then the second question that you want to ask yourself is, does the recognition allow me to own it? Accept it as well. You can look at it as ownership or acceptance. Because when we start this shadow work, this emotional integration work, to be able to gain from our spiritual journey, it is very easy to brush off these painful truths about our shadows, because we're so set in stone with the idea that if we align our frequency to the one of the abundance that we want, the abundance is just going to flow to us and we will be healed for eternity. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. The very first step of the 5 steps towards emotional well-being, which is something that I talked about, and I'll link at the top right-hand corner and underneath this video if you want to check it out. But the very first step is recognition. And recognition is something that we look at by asking that first question of shadow integration. The second part of those 5 steps is acceptance. And we cannot move further in those 5 steps of emotional well-being unless we can recognize and then accept what we recognized. And neither recognition or acceptance is part of our spiritual practice if we are emotionally bypassing, if we are spiritually bypassing, right? So the fact that we recognize this shadow for what it is from our subconscious, not superficially, means that we have solid, relevant proof that that shadow is ours. The fact that the shadow is there because you didn't get that recognition of the effort that you put in, if we're looking at perfectionism again, does not mean that that shadow belongs to the people that did not recognize your effort. The shadow belongs to you because it is an imposition of a habit based on the lack of attention that was given to you. It was imposed onto you, therefore it is yours. That shadow is there to protect you from whatever was imposed upon you. And it is not a negative thing, even though it might sound like it's a negative thing. It's not a negative thing because it's there to protect you. The negative part about this is that it is protecting you when you don't need the protection, which is where that shadow work comes in. So you need to own it or accept it, either, right? You cannot own it without accepting it. So accept the fact that the shadow is there. There's no weakness in doing that. There's only growth from that. So it's very, very important. The third question you should be asking yourself is, have I learned how to relate to it so I know it is my own and not a projection? And a good example of why that is important is when I was looking at my low self-worth shadow to figure out where it's coming from. I forced the reasoning behind why that low self-worth is. And it was a projection from my ego, because the truth as to why that shadow is there was either too deep within my subconscious for me to be able to comfortably dig deep enough in that session of shadow work, or my ego was preventing me from digging deep enough because it doesn't want me to figure out what it is, because if I do, that means change, and the ego does not like change because it means the ego cannot stay stable and comfortable in whatever position it is. So that would be a projection from the ego. The ego projects an explanation as to why that shadow is there. And if you don't have the true, real explanation of why that shadow is there, if you have recognized it and accepted it, but it's not true, that means you need to go back to the very start of the recognition part to really, truly recognize what it is, then accept it. And then you can look at it more deeply, start understanding it to really truthfully know that that is true. That is my own shadow. It's not a projection from my ego. It's not something that my ego made up to distract me from the path that I'm on in terms of that shadow work, to actually see the shadow for what it is, right? So we want to make sure we avoid these projections from our ego. And also projections from somebody else. You might be doing the shadow work and you might be trying to figure out where that shadow is coming from, but then you start thinking about the person that for some reason is related to that shadow that you're working on, and start thinking, how would that person think about you in terms of the shadow that you're working on? So you might be looking at the shadow from another person's perspective as opposed to looking at it from your perspective, which is another form of projection, right? So we want to just look at ourselves and at our subconscious to own it and really figure out if it's our own and not just a projection. And then lastly, the very final part of shadow integration, which is quite a difficult one, especially if you have people around you all the time that you care about. And the question is, have I learned how to mindfully express the shadow so it is healthy for me and the others around me? Now, the reason why it is so important is because we do all this work to recognize the shadow, to accept the shadow, to understand the shadow, to make sure that it's not a projection and we can own it. But then what happens as a consequence of that, when we start feeling, when we start experiencing emotions that we have been suppressing for all this time, we will inevitably emotionally vomit from time to time, become super expressive when something inconvenient happens. When something good happens, we become overly happy. Something bad happens, we become overly sad or overly angry or overly annoyed. And then if you have somebody that's around you all the time, like for example, me and my wife, we live in a van, we're in close proximity 24/7, something might happen that might put me in a situation where I'm a little bit annoyed or a little bit angry, but because I'm learning to express these emotions now, because I'm going through the shadow work, I'm expressing something that I have not expressed before or haven't expressed before in that sort of manner, and it can instantly put concern on to the other person. They might be like, oh, why is he suddenly so angry? Why is he suddenly so upset about a minor thing? Which is completely understandable. It's putting them in an uncomfortable situation, and they might start getting worried. So we need to be mindful about that. And in turn, we need to be mindful about how we express our emotions and how that expression affects everybody else around us. If you can become mindful of all of that, then the integration is, so to say, complete, right? It's never going to be 100% complete because it's a lifelong journey of integrating and becoming even better and better of the emotional work, of that shadow work. But building the mindfulness in anything life, especially in shadow work, can be completely transcendental. You can reach full emotional intelligence, full emotional expression, full honest emotional expression, and never make anybody question as to why you're feeling the way you're feeling, and never create doubt in your mind if you should be feeling the way you're feeling. That's how powerful mindfulness is, and that is why this is the last step from those 4 questions that I had a thought about, that I wanted to share in terms of shadow work integration. So I hope this helps. I hope these questions make sense. If you want to write them down, I'll leave them in the description just so it's in a bit more of a digestible format, so you don't have to skip through parts and write them down or pause or anything like that. You just watch the whole thing throughout without pausing, makes your life easier, and makes your life easier, makes sense, right? I do want to say I have a free community where I help people become exemplary flame keepers, somebody who looks after their flame, which is their soul, by mindfully integrating their feelings and their emotions into their spiritual journey so they can accept the full amount of abundance that is waiting them at the end of it. If that's something that you're interested in, the link's going to be in the description. Click on it. It's completely free. Check it out. We have daily affirmation guidance there, weekly group meetings. We also have guided meditations and exclusive monthly content based on the choices that the community makes. I really hope I can see you there. I would be super excited to have a chat with you as well. So check it out. It's completely free. It is a very good community, very good space. You're all welcome. If you did enjoy the video, click like. Every single like allows the algorithm to push the video out into the YouTube realm. So more people see it, I can give more value. The more people like these videos, the more people subscribe as well. That's important. The more I can keep up with the content like this and give you more and more value. Also leave a comment. Do you agree with what I said? Do you think the questions are relevant to shadow integration? Do you feel like I could fine-tune the questions, maybe make them a bit more effective? I'm super interested to hear your perspective in terms of the topics that I talk about, because They're very relevant to me, and I feel like the more I can fine-tune the topics that I talk about, the more they will be able to help the people that I'm trying to help. Otherwise, this has been Orlando Schulz from Productively Mindful. I love you all. I can't do the other one because you won't be able to hear me, but yeah, you can finish it. Put your hand on the screen so you can... Oh my god, the angle. Something like that. Just put your hand on the screen and just make a heart. I love you. I'll speak to you soon. I'm probably at Vipassana at this point, so if I don't respond to comments, apologies. I will respond to them at the end of the month. Bear with me. I'll be back from Vipassana all enlightened and stuff, so, I'll see you there. After that. Bye!